Um, it was probably from my background and my upbringing, and if you read my first book, you'll see why. Because I was brought up in the country, and I've always had animals. Always had animals around me, and I was always outside. So I wanted an outdoors life. So yeah, it just seemed the logical thing to do. But yeah, it just worked out. But if you read the book, you'll find out all those reasons why how it worked out. Yeah, the worst part was I had to go to Queensland to do it because there was no vet school in Western Australia. So back when I did it, I had to go to Queensland University. So that meant being away from my home, my family for a year at a time, nearly a whole year at a time. So that was difficult going to another state because in those days, flights were very expensive and you just didn't do it. We had no money to fly, so I was over there for the whole year. Once I was there for the whole year and didn't dream of coming home till the year was finished. So that was the hard part, having to live in Queensland for every year for 5 years. And as well as that, I probably wasn't a good student, but it was. But when we got to the practical side of the course, I enjoyed that. So I did much better once we got to the interesting part of the course, and put me through because we didn't have much money in those days, but I had a scholarship with the Department of Agriculture in Western Australia, which meant they put me through uni, but I then had to work for them for 5 years. So that's why I went to the Kimberley, because my first job when I graduated was up in Derby. And that was wonderful because that then opened my eyes to the Northwest, and that's why I've been involved with the Northwest ever since, because of my first job being in the Kimberley. And I saw the opportunity of the Pilbara, and came to the Pilbara as soon as I finished my 5 years. Yeah, well, again, I'll go back to my book because there was something happened in the book when I was only 17, and I experienced death of a dog for the first time, and that stiffened me. That sort of made me tougher, and from then on, I was able to understand it a lot more, and I handled it okay. I think also you have to be the right temperament to be a vet. I've seen a lot of people who should not be vets because they have the wrong temperament. But I think I was lucky in that I either had the right temperament or I developed the right temperament to be a vet and not let death worry me. Death doesn't worry me in that regard. It's just one of those things. Death is part of living and dying. It's all part of the natural cycle. Yeah, good question. When I was younger, I probably got a lot more responsibility and there was a lot more pressure because there was a lot of work. I was always working very, very hard. But again, I think I have the right temperament to handle that pressure. And I've also developed ways to accommodate that. But I think I have the right what we call instinctive drives. If you wanted to look it up, it's called instinctive drive analysis, and there's four sorts of instincts. People can be either a verifier, who've got to have, they've got to have certainty. They've got to, or you've got to be an authenticator, which means you need reasons, or you've got to be a completer, which is someone who can't finish a task unless it's done properly. Or the fourth one is an improviser. And I'm an improviser, which means I don't get hung up on perfection. I'm not a perfectionist. And so a lot of people who are perfectionists should not be vets, because to be a vet, you never achieve perfection, because sometimes people don't have money to to spend on the animal, or it's impossible to fix it. Whereas in human medicine, virtually there's no budget, there's no constraint. So it doesn't worry me. Put it this way, I'm happy to be a non-perfectionist. But a lot of people who are naturally perfectionists find that practice very, very difficult. But I find it quite easy. I find it, especially as I've got older, because I also being an improviser, I delegate things myself. I can't do it myself. I can get other people to do it, so it doesn't worry me delegating. So I think, again, I think I'm just I've always been the right temperament, the right personality, the right instinctive drive to do that. That's why after 50 years, it's been 50 years since I was a vet, and I'm still enjoying it, and I'm still working as a vet. So that's why I was with a client when you rang earlier, and I don't work hard, or not as hard as I used to, but I'm doing other things such as the book and the television, and I do, I guess I just do what suits me, which is the easier side of vet work, bit of surgery, bit of people. I like people, so that helps, and I get on well with people most of the time, so that helps. Because, and this is the thing about vet practice, and the great thing about travelling around, you see a lot of people from all walks of life, and you see a lot of animals, a whole variety of animals, from horses to cats and dogs, and a lot of wildlife, and a lot of unusual pets. And I do everything. I do cattle work, I do horse work, I do dogs, cats, everything. And I guess that's made it interesting for me. So I'm quite I really like that because of the variety. Whereas if I was stuck in a city just doing dogs or cats, I would find it boring eventually. So I've been very lucky that I've always done everything. Everything comes my way, and I'm not particularly good at anything, maybe, but it doesn't worry me. It doesn't worry me, and it doesn't usually worry the clients, because I'll say to the client, look, I'm not a specialist horse vet, I'm not a specialist cattle vet. I'm probably best with dogs of all the animals, and I've got all my other vet practices that I can refer people to. So I guess I get away with it. So it's I do enjoy the variety. So the variety makes it interesting. The variety makes it special. And this year I did all the race meetings, and I do them every year. And I see racing people, and I see station people, farm people, and people in the little towns. The other thing that is very special to me is that because I go to these small towns such as Shark Bay, such as Meekatharra and Onslow and Wanaka, the people appreciate it more because otherwise they'd have to travel a long way to see a vet. They might see someone better than me, but at least I've come to them, and I don't claim to be perfect, but I can do the simple things. I also help a lot of people over the phone, and I often triage things to say, look, you really need to go and see a vet, or look, I can send you some medication, or look, I'll be coming through in a couple of weeks, I'll see the animal then. So, that's sort of the secret, I suppose, the variety and the fact that I go to these little towns. And, I'm interested. The other thing that sort of happened to me is, it's like my age of 72, I'm still working as a vet, is that I feel I must keep my hand in because of the TV show. By having the TV show, I'm out there seeing animals still, meeting people still, and looking at interesting cases that I can incorporate in the TV show for the next series, because we hope to do a series 3 after this one is successful, which we think it will be. We'll then do series 3. So I'm already looking for stories for season 3. Okay. So so you must watch series 1 and then look out for series 2.
Yeah.
Mostly experience, because back when I was at university, our group was probably the first group that did much small animal work up till then. Vets, because I went to Queensland Uni, you were mostly there as a production vet, so you're there for the sheep industry or the cattle industry, and everything else was superfluous. So you were there really to try to help the country. And my first 5 years, I was in the Kimberley, mostly looking after cattle, doing the tuberculosis eradication campaign, and then I picked up the small animal work along the way, but it wasn't taught to a high level, whereas now it's taught to a much higher level at universities. And I think you're right that they try and give you a grounding, but then you've got to get out and specialise in one or the other. But I was always an all-rounder, and I probably, when I went into my own practice, I thought, well, there's not much money in cattle, there's not much money in horses, there's no money in wildlife whatsoever. But people do care about their dogs and cats, so I became more a dog and cat vet for business reasons. And most of my practices now, all of them are predominantly small animal, predominantly cat, dog and cat. But I do everything because I've always done everything. You could say I'm an old school vet who did everything, because when you're in a town like Derby or Broome back in the 70s, you were the only vet for 1,000 miles in any direction, so you had to do everything. I've got a young vet works for me in Newman at the moment. His name's Tom, and he knows he's the only vet for 1,000 kilometres in any direction, so he has to do everything as well. And so you have a go. It's a spirit of having a go, and the spirit of being a non-perfectionist, and just do the best you can. Probably my last question probably explains it all. How back in 1971 we were trained to be production vets, looking after the sheep and the cattle and livestock mostly, and we were the first group that started to do a little bit of small animal work. Whereas today it's probably more small animal work than anything. The other thing that's happened is that time has been the humanisation of vets. Back 50 years ago, people didn't care about their dogs or cats too much. They were just there, and if they got sick, they died or were shot or whatever. They cared more about their livestock. The livestock was their income. So that's the biggest change, I suppose, is the humanisation of animals, and the fact that people are probably more affluent these days. There's a lot more affluence around, but back 50 years ago, people didn't have the money to spend on their animals, and it just wasn't done. I guess communication is probably the big one. Having mobile phones and mobile FPOS machines and laptops, it sort of makes life a bit easier, and having better drugs, all those things. There's been a lot of changes over the years, and it certainly is easier today because you've got probably far better medications than were around 50 years ago. Well, like I said before, the TV show keeps me relevant. I feel I've got to get out there to gather stories for Desert Vet, and also gather the thoughts about my books. So I'm doing writing, and I'm doing the TV show. But I guess I also genuinely enjoy meeting people, and I genuinely enjoy meeting animals, because animals have been good to me for 50 years. Animals have been my profession for 50 years, and the animals have owners. So I guess I've had a charmed life. I've had a wonderful life, wonderful career, dealing with animals and with the people that own their animals. So it's a three-way profession. Being a vet you're a partnership. In a partnership with the animal and the owner. It's a three-way thing, and you've got to get on with both of them. I guess I get on with animals very well. I use telepathy a lot of the time with every animal I try and have a brain-to-brain communication with that animal. Have a bit of a talk, and I settle it down without saying a word. And people always remark that animals, particularly dogs, seem to like me. I've only ever had one dog bite in 50 years, and that was because I was a bit careless. But generally, I can read animals, and they can read me. And I've used that all the time with all animals, try to have that communication. Oh. Especially with dogs. With dogs, I have a way of communicating with dogs that I believe we all have the ability, but we don't use it enough. So yeah, I'll write about that in the book. There's a little chapter on telepathy. Look, I think the best thing is to try and find out if you really are suited for it. And the best thing is to if you know your instinctive drive, learn your instinctive drive, decide if this is good for you. Also, you need to have a strong set of values. So you probably need really good, have had a really good upbringing, good parenting, good ethics, because there's vets out there that should not be vets. They should not be in business. They should not deal with the public or deal with animals. They're the wrong sorts. And the universities, unfortunately, don't look as closely as they should at the character of the vet student. They should, I believe that the vet schools should look beyond academic marks. Medical schools have done this for a long time. They give you an aptitude test, and you might be the brightest person in the class, but you may not have the aptitude to be a doctor. So you don't even get into the medical school. So I believe the vet schools should do the same thing. They should screen potential vets and get rid of those who are not suited. So that would be my advice to anyone. Make sure that you really are suited to the profession. Make sure you've got a strong sense of values and ethics and honesty and all those things. Otherwise, you're wasting your time. I was first in Karratha, and it was quite funny that someone brought this dog in, and because in those days I didn't take detailed records, so I just dispensed the medication. So I saw this dog had fight wounds, and someone brought it in, so I treated it, and off they went. And then a few days later, a different person brought the dog in, and I thought, I think I've seen this dog before. And I said, well, yeah, not surprising. This is a red dog, but he goes around and he had these wounds, so we thought we'd bring him in. I said, yeah, he's already under treatment, but he never stayed anywhere too long. Anyway, that happened several times. Different people would bring him in, and then he realised who I was, that I was the person that helped him when he was unwell or injured or whatever. And then he started to come and visit me of his own accord. He'd bring himself in. And I'll tell you, what's the matter, Red Dog? It's, I've really just come for a chat, or look, I've got something in my foot. Will you have a look at it? So, okay, you've got a wound there, or whatever it was. And then he just hang around. Then one day he went to drive back, and he was standing by my car, and he said, he wanted a lift. So that's when I started to give him lifts everywhere, and he'd recognise me in my car. But I was just one of many, many people that knew him. There was, probably hundreds and hundreds of people that he treated as his friend. He would have this ability to decide that who was his friend and who wasn't. And I was chosen to be one of his friends. He was like a lot of the single men who worked up there. He was an alpha male, unsterilised stray, and a lot of the men who worked up there were similar. They were single guys. They liked drinking. They liked fighting, and they liked having a good old time. And he became like that. He was just like like that. And I was like that then too. I wasn't a fighter or anything, but I was very social, and I was a single guy, so I think he also liked families, but I think he thought he took on the character of a single guy, so he did pretty well. And he'd go around to all the settlements quarters and the sites where these guys were, and he'd get well looked after. And he just made himself at home. That's true. It's true, because I'd see him everywhere. I'd pick him up, he'd go off into Tom Price, I'd pick him up near Broome, near Port Hedland, and these are usually around Karratha to Dampier, but he'd go out to the stations and try and be a sheepdog. He'd do all sorts of things. But in book 4, I'll reveal a lot more stories about Red Dog. I haven't been heard before. But if you read the book by Nancy Gillespie, that's an accurate account of what happened. The book by Louis de Bernalis is fiction. It's fiction based on true stories, but all the characters were invented. Whereas when I write about him, I'll write about real characters, real people, real animals, real situations. Well, he had brain damage, and I think the brain damage was possibly caused by poison bait, but we never be too sure. But by the time I saw him, he was having fits, and he was in a bad way, and I kept him alive for about a week. In the end, his brain was too badly damaged, and so I put him down. So he died by lethal injection, my hands. And then I buried him out near Cossack. I was an optimist. I've always been an optimist. Again, that's in the book. I usually never give up. But in the end, with him, I had to give up. But I probably kept him alive for longer than I should have. And that's because I was optimistic. I was hopeful he'd start to get better. But he just got worse, so it was the right decision to end his life. There was a lot of pressure because he was loved by the community, and they had put their responsibility in my hands, and I felt I failed them because I couldn't save him. But it was I did the best I could. But yeah, there was a lot of pressure on that, and I had to make the decision that I had failed. But that was okay because it was the only thing to do. It was the only kind of thing to do. Well, these days we'd probably get a better diagnosis. At the time, I was on my own. I didn't have any laboratory. I didn't have any specialist to turn to because you really need to see a neurologist. And you need to be in a hospital. I didn't have a hospital at the stage. I just had my house in Roban and the car. I didn't have a proper clinic anywhere. It was the early days. It was before I built Karratha Hospital. It was almost built. But yeah, so it was a bit frustrating that I could only do simple treatments, and that's why I guess I've always done that. I've never got to a higher level, but other people could go to a higher level. So these days, it could have been a different outcome, but who knows? Because to me, they are the dogs I understand the best, and I believe they are the most intelligent of the breeds of dogs. They've been bred for working, and I've always had a very close connection with all of the dogs. I've probably had now about 10 red dogs in my lifetime, and I've still got one. I've got one right now. She's just had a litter of puppies. And I was very happy to give to sell those puppies to a lot of other people. So it's and everyone agrees that they are the smartest dogs around. So that's the reason.